What's up, everybody? Welcome to Moxie Bets, presented by Caesar Sportsbook. I'm Katie Mox, and the Kansas City Chiefs are Super Bowl champions once again. Those so we're going to unpack all of it here on the show. So let's welcome in our guest, Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports. He is a draft analyst. He is an NFL writer. He is a host of the With the First Pick podcast, also the Pick Six podcast. So who better to break down WTF happened to the 49ers than you? How are we doing today?
Hey, Katie. I'm doing a little better than you, even though I'm under the weather. And not from acting up in Vegas, just from being in Vegas around all the cigarette smoke and hedonism.
Well, look, we were there for 8 days, and that's the thing. I noticed by like the fifth day, we all started to get casino voice, and it was just living in cigarette-filled, oxygen-pumped rooms for that many days. Plus, to a certain extent, I think we just ran ourselves into the ground. But a lot of great content, a lot of great shows. Congratulations to you and the Pick Six podcast on the 60 Awards. 36,000 people tuned in to watch on Paramount Plus. That's huge. That's amazing.
That's wild. Wild indeed.
I absolutely love it. Couldn't happen to a better cast of characters. But all right, let's get into the game. 49ers lost in overtime. I believe it was only the second overtime ever in Super Bowl history. The Chiefs won back-to-back titles for the first time in 19 or 20 years. I thought the first half of the game. Look, here's the thing. I was able to go to the game, which was so exciting. I was so happy.
There with Kiana.
I was there with Kiana. Yeah. So Sherry gave me her ticket. So Sherry she used to work with us at CBS. Now she's at NFL Network. She was actually there covering the game. So proud of her. So amazing for the AFC, but we won't hold that against her. And so we were behind set and we were chit-chatting, and I was trying to, by hook or by crook with the CBS talent team. I'm like, I got to get in this game. I know that at the last second, a lot of things will open up. I'm your girl. Look at me. I'm sure you have bigger celebrities on your roster, but I need this ticket. And Sherry was standing right there. She goes, she was like, I have a ticket. Do you want mine? Because they gave her a ticket even though she was working the game. So I cried. It was a big thing. But I will say,
that's good. You're appreciative.
Well, I mean, come on. Like I love this 49ers more than anything. I'm very depressed. I'm very down. I think I'm also just tired. But then I used to be season ticket holder for the 49ers for like 7 years with my family. But since I started working in sports, moved to the East Coast, I have not seen the 49ers play in 3 years. The last game I went to was the 2019 NFC Championship game. Then there was a 2020 season. No fans were allowed. 2021, 22, I'm gone. So I broke my streak of not seeing the Niners by seeing them in a Super Bowl. It was very special. But I will say, when you're there and you're in the nosebleeds, which is where I was, but I went for free, I'm not complaining. I'm very happy. It's hard to really know what's going on, right? When you're watching the broadcast and you can hear like we didn't know about Greenlaw, and I was so high up there, I couldn't even see what down it was on the screen. They had all these next gen stats, but for some reason I'm like, where are we? What are we, 3rd and 4? Are we 2nd and 10? I don't know. So it was kind of hard for me to understand exactly what was going on. So I'm so glad that you're here to break things down with me. I felt like in the first quarter and even the first half, the Niners looked okay. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey fumbling the ball on the first drive was a killer. But I thought that this defense looked really good in the first half. What was your takeaway?
Oh, exactly that. And I was going to ask you, how'd you feel about having the 10-point lead early on? Because I would have felt incredibly nervous.
Scared. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we had a 21. Yeah. We had, what was it? 21-10 in the last one. It was just, it felt the same. Yeah.
I guess historically you're like, okay, we have 10 points up on Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. This is where we want to be. I thought that Kyle Shanahan did a great job calling the game. There were no turtle up moments where you're like, okay, that's clearly him being tight. I thought that Brock Purdy played as good a game as you could have hoped for. He didn't make any major mistakes. And you could even argue, getting ahead of myself here, in overtime on that third down, if they'd blocked Chris Jones, Brandon Ayuk was wide open, Juwan Jennings was wide open. So I think the right guard made a mistake. I don't know for sure.
No, that's what Chris Jones said. He said, I think someone missed their assignment because nobody was guarding me.
Because two guys were wide open. L'Jarius Sneed got absolutely roasted by Ayuk. And then I'm not sure who was on Juwan Jennings, but Juwan Jennings was open on the right side. So this is just a situation I think that Kyle Shanahan was wrong place, wrong time. And that's because you're facing Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And Patrick Mahomes is just, he's just unstoppable. It is crazy to me that nothing seems to get in his way. But early on, to your point, that defense for the 49ers was getting after it. I talked to Chris Kocurek, who is the defensive line coach, on Monday night at opening night. And I talked to him 4 years ago, and he was awesome then. So I went back and talked to him again. We ended up talking about Fred Warner a little bit. And he said Fred Warner is one of the best players I've ever been around, just in terms of his leadership, in terms of the athleticism and the way he can take over a game. And we saw that. There's an argument he made that had they won that game, he might have been in running for MVP. He was so good. And on the other side, the running game was going well. I thought Kyle did a good job of leaning on Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, he fumbled. He never does it, but he's your best player. You're going to ride or die with him. Yeah. I thought in the middle of the game, Kyle got away from the run a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't necessarily Brock's fault that he wasn't up to the task. I thought the way that the secondary played, especially L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie, they were playing out of their minds.
Right.
I would have just kept feeding the ball to Christian McCaffrey until his legs fell off. There was no reason not to do that.
Well, I agree with you. And we saw that happen in the AFC Championship game when the Ravens abandoned the run. So the fact that we saw them in the third quarter kind of abandon the run, it's like, what are you doing? And to your point about Fred Warner, I completely agree with you. I also thought that Chase Young had a hell of a game.
Yeah.
Considering he was a big problem in the 2 playoff games leading up to this point.
But I thought he made some, Jahmyr Gibbs.
He made some, yeah, exactly. He made some big boy stops there. But yeah, when you look at Patrick Mahomes, you look at these numbers, right? 34 of 36, 333 yards, 2 touchdowns, 9 carries, 66 rushing yards. I mean, come on.
And those rushing yards came at the worst possible time, late in the game. One on the quarterback keeper that no one saw coming. And I think Romo mentioned this. You wouldn't have heard this because you were in the stands, but it was one of those plays that felt like Andy Reid, they had discussed in training camp, and he just put in his back pocket until literally the Super Bowl because no one had seen it before.
Yeah.
The other thing is with Patrick, what was I going to say? There's something else that just sticks out with him. He is a better athlete than we give him credit for.
Yeah.
I think he sort of fooled us all when he took his shirt off and he looked like me with that pot belly. Turns out he's actually a lot faster than he looks. And he got the most. So he and Rashee Rice got into it at one point.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, you didn't see that either.
Yeah.
Early on, because Rashee Rice was wide open and he didn't get him the ball. I think he forced the ball to Travis Kelce. It's hysterical that Rashee Rice is telling Patrick Mahomes where to throw the ball. But he came back and he made play after play as well.
Yeah.
And the guys that weren't making plays, Mecole Hardman hasn't caught a ball in 4 years, and he catches the touchdown pass. Justin Watson has struggled with drops this year. He had several big catches. MVS had a big catch on the turnover. Just little things. Like the turnover isn't really Ray McCloud's fault because he hit Darrell Luter's foot.
Yeah.
But Ray could have just fallen on the ball instead of trying to pick it up. Like little things that just sort of compound.
Okay. That point right there, that miffed punt that turned into the Chiefs' first touchdown. Yeah. Was that the turning point of the game? Is that where you felt like the Niners lost it?
It felt like it because when you remember how, and typically what you talk about teams coming out of halftime, like that first drive after halftime is going to be, it's incredibly important. Threw an interception. The first play was the toss to Pacheco, hit him in the shoulder pad, and he dropped it. And then the next play, or a few plays later, was the interception, Jair Brown. And you're like, okay, let's go. And then the 49ers went on a series of 3-and-outs. Like they couldn't get anything out of it. They were in great field position on that play. And then that punt was 10-6, I believe. Luter McCloud mistake. Very next play, MVS wide open in the end zone. And then it felt like, okay.
Well, I mean, they were on the 10-yard line at that point. Right. I mean, they just gave them a touchdown.
Right. I don't have any issue in overtime with Kyle Shanahan wanting the ball first. I don't care about that. That's fine. And his rationale was we wanted 3 cracks at it. We wanted the ball last.
We trust our defense. Okay.
Yeah, we score a touchdown. Fine. They score a touchdown. Then we get the ball, and then it's sudden death. That part I get. The problem is that you didn't score a touchdown. And they've been moving the ball pretty well on that Chiefs defense early on in the game. So I don't hate that necessarily. Brock Purdy at the moment wasn't too big for him. He had a couple big throws. The big throw to the use check on the right.
Yep.
And then
a lot of people cashed on the use check for the first reception prop, by the way. Adam for an anytime touchdown. That didn't cash. But
he had the first reception too?
Yeah. I didn't have first reception, but I know a lot of people that did. And the odds of that were pretty high. So a lot of people were happy with that.
Yeah, I thought he played well. He had another good throwback to Christian McCaffrey, and Christian ripped off a 20-something yard gain. By the way, one of my bold predictions during the week was there would be as many turnovers as touchdowns. 4-4.
There was
4-4.
Wow. Well, and yeah, I mean, you were right. And yeah, when you look at Brock Purdy, 23 of 38, 255 yards, a touchdown for a rookie first-time quarterback. I agree. There's the people who hate Brock Purdy are finding every reason to hate him, and the people that like him or think he's good. I mean, I thought he had a solid performance. Yes, he didn't put that final drive together that won the game.
Block Chris Jones.
because they didn't. So is that Trent Williams, or whose fault was that?
I think it was the right guard. When I
it's always the right guard.
But I don't want to blame anyone without them raising their hands first. But it was an obvious mistake because on no planet are you leaving Chris Jones unblocked to crush your quarterback. No, he didn't make it. Yeah, I thought he did. I had no issue with the way Brock Purdy played.
Yeah, I didn't either. I ran into his dad when I was walking through the concourse. And so I gave him a little nudge. I said, let's go 13. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I felt good about myself for that.
He appreciated it.
But what a cool moment to be Mr. Irrelevant, and then to be in the Super Bowl, and to play well. And you're going up against the best in the world with the Chiefs, and certainly with Patrick Mahomes. Speaking of the best in the world, Mahomes just 28 years old. He's the fourth starting quarterback to win 3 Super Bowls, including Brady, Joe Montana, Terry Bradshaw, and Troy Aikman. Is he now firmly in the conversation as the greatest of all time? 28 years old.
Right.
Took a lot of these guys a lot more time.
He's 28. I don't know if I want to go that far just yet. I mean, if he retired today, though, then we would have to have a serious conversation about it. But I think the difference is this, right? So Peyton Manning is arguably the second best quarterback of all time. The problem is he didn't win his Super Bowl until 2009. He was drafted in 1998. So there was a few minutes in between there, and he couldn't beat Tom Brady. Patrick Mahomes is Tom Brady. Although Patrick couldn't beat Tom Brady either, turns out. But now that Tom is gone, Patrick is the guy that no one can seem to beat.
Right.
It's close. I'm in no rush to make this proclamation, especially since he and Andy Reid are coming back and probably going to win a few more. For now, I'll put him top 3. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you mentioned Joe Montana. There's so many great quarterbacks. John Elway, all those guys. I mean, Terry Bradshaw. Is he number 2 after Tom Brady? Probably, but I'm willing just to wait and see.
Yeah, he's got time. Yeah. He's not going anywhere.
Are you putting him ahead? You're not putting him ahead of Joe Montana. That you wouldn't do that.
No.
Okay.
No, because Joe Montana, look, again, bias, but Joe Montana didn't throw a single interception in a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has thrown a few, and not that that's a huge qualifier, but it's something. It was a different brand of football back then too. Quarterbacks
weren't the quarterbacks.
You could murder the quarterbacks. They weren't as protected. So, and again, that's no fault to Patrick Mahomes, though. I mean, he's lucky that he's playing in a time where there's more protection for quarterbacks and certainly for concussions in their heads. Let's talk about coaching, because Shanahan is getting a lot of slander right now, particularly that his team was not prepared to understand the difference in the overtime rules in the playoffs and Super Bowl versus the regular season. Now, we know that the Chiefs have experience here because they were a part of why everything changed in that AFC Championship game with the Bills. And they came out and they said, from week 1 in the preseason, we were talking about this. We had several meetings about it leading up into the Super Bowl. And you had the 49ers players out there like Kyle Usher being like, I actually had no idea. It's a bad look for Shanahan. So I'm curious what you think about that. And then my second part of the question is, Shanahan 0-3 in Super Bowls. How much does that worry you?
So let's start with the first question. I was thinking when the Kansas City Chiefs players were saying that they had been beaten about the head with the overtime rules since August, I was like, that's sort of weird. Like, why are you talking about overtime playoff rules in August?
True.
But Patrick Mahomes said, I was so tired of hearing about it that it felt like second nature when we finally got there. I don't necessarily fault Kyle Shanahan for not going over playoff overtime rules throughout the course of the season. And I would imagine Juszczyk's telling the truth. I don't think he has any reason to make it up. But Mecole Hardman also didn't know that he had the game-winning touchdown. He said he blacked out. So, I mean, it's
stuff happens.
Right. Things happen where it doesn't matter necessarily. Don McNabb once famously said that he didn't know that how overtime rules worked. So I don't think that had any effect on how things played out. And Kyle also said after the game that the analytics department decided that getting the ball first was in their best interest. And I think someone tweeted this out. I think Seth Walter, ESPN, talked to several analytics folks around the league, and they said there's no definitive right or wrong answer about when you take the football.
You just got to score. Yeah.
You got to score a touchdown. And then, because I get, what needs to happen if you let the other team go first, but if the other team scores a touchdown, now the pressure's on you to do the same, which wasn't the same if they kick a field goal, for example. And the other question is, so Kyle Shanahan's 0-3. I think he's basically Andy Reid before Andy Reid.
That's what I was going to say. How long did it take Andy Reid before it was
decades.
2019, before he got his first ring, right?
So he arrived in Kansas City in 2013. They ran him out of town, out of Philadelphia, after he went to every single NFC championship game, but he couldn't win it.
Because he didn't have Patrick Mahomes.
So, yeah, he feels like partly that. It feels like partly Peyton Manning. who couldn't win it in 2009, like I mentioned before, because in part, Tom Brady, they actually had to change the rules for Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Because they were so aggressive with the defensive backs were so aggressive with the wide receivers in those Patriots heyday days that Jim Irsay had the rules changed. So you would be less aggressive with the wide receivers, allow Marvin Harrison and those guys to get off the line of scrimmage, Dallas Clark. And eventually it happened. And I think it's just a matter of time. I thought this was his best coach game in a big moment. I don't know how you feel about that.
Again, I'm going to have to actually watch it back when I'm ready, like on the broadcast, because when you're there and you're in the nosebleeds, it was hard for me to really know everything that was going on.
And this isn't a game you necessarily want to rewatch.
No, I don't. No, but I want to really know everything that happened, because again, and you know, even the Usher concert, you can't even see everything that's happening when you're all the way.
Yeah, what'd you think of the concert?
Okay, so interesting. We have our Pick Six podcast group chat, and there were some slanderous words in there from some of our colleagues about it. And what I think it is I think that Usher is more for women. You know, and he was taking his shirt off and he's dancing and he's whatever. And, you know, the music is very millennial, which is my kind of generation. So we absolutely loved it. But I can understand why men are like, oh, whoa. Like, we don't need the shirt being taken off and all these things. But I'm like, we have to deal with the women being naked in every halftime performance. And so that's the only thing I can think of as why some people don't like it, or they don't like his music. I don't know. I thought it was great.
So Usher's 45. I looked it up immediately when he took his shirt off. I said, okay. Usher's doing pretty good for himself. I was fine with him taking his shirt off. But I've never been a huge Usher guy. I did love Alicia Keys. I love Lil Jon. I love Ludacris.
Her voice cracked a little bit when she first came out.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
She had the red outfit on. She
recovered. Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, and by the way, you'll love this, Rick Spielman, who I do with the First Pick podcast with. This was one of his favorite shows.
Really?
He's a big R&B guy, so he loved it. But for me, my favorite ever all time was the LA Super Bowl, because that was like right in my wheelhouse.
Yes. Whatever music is like your kind of growing up or core years of your life. And I love that too, because I'm a huge rap fan as well, but I love R&B and I love Usher. And so I was happy with that. I love the Shakira and J-Lo one too. I thought that was amazing. I thought the Beyonce Bowl was amazing until the 49ers lost.
That was that one. That's right.
Yeah. When she blew, it was in New Orleans, which is where it's going to be next year. She blew out the electricity.
Yeah, that's right.
Which ended up being something good for the 49ers. They tried to put a drive back together and then they just couldn't do it. What changes, if any, do you think that this 49ers team has to make? Is it that there are issues, or is it just that the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes are like 2.0 of the Patriots and Brady? It's just impossible to beat them no matter how good you are.
I'm grabbing my list
it's hard. Nearly impossible.
Right. No, I'm grabbing my list of soon-to-be free agents because I've been talking about this for a while. But I think one of the other big losses that we're not talking enough about, and you didn't know about, Dre Greenlaw. Like when he went out 9 minutes to go in the second quarter, I believe is what it was, right around that time. Huge. Oren Burks comes in, hasn't played a lot, and Travis Kelce goes from 1 catch for 1 yard to 9 for 93 or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with Oren Burks not playing like Dre Greenlaw. And that's no disrespect to Oren Burks. That's just how good Dre Greenlaw is. So we're not talking enough about that, because that's sort of when the game changed. When we talk about the MVS touchdown being the moment, but the slow burn may have been losing Dre Greenlaw. And then we're not having any of these other conversations about, well, what about the missed block?
Right.
Whatever, down the stretch. What about the blocked extra point? None of that matters. But coming up, Chase Young, Javon Kinlaw, Randy Gregory, they're all free agents. You got to figure that out.
Well, you got Ayuk with saying things about he might not be back next year.
Oh, he must want some money, huh?
Yeah.
He wants some Debo money. Juwan Jennings is a free agent, and that's actually a pretty big one, because when you face a team, and you rarely face a team that can shut down Ayuk and Debo consistently, because you have L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie, Juwan Jennings flashed, and he not only did he throw a touchdown, he caught one too, right? Yeah, he caught one.
Yeah.
So he was a big part of their success, and hadn't had to do that a lot. But I think his nickname is First and Juwan. Is that right?
Yeah, First and Juwan.
I love that. That's a great nickname.
Good one.
But he had again another possible candidate along with Fred Warner for MVP had they won that game. In overtime, how'd you feel going into overtime?
It all feels like a blur, right? I mean, I'm there. I've been working all week. I had a red eye flight that night, so I'm trying to change my flight to an even later red eye because my flight was at 10:10, and I'm like, oh no, we're not doing this, And so I'm getting in.
That's another level of stress.
And we go down. Yeah, getting into overtime. I'm like, okay, we're still in this. I'm also just such a positive fan. I believe that we can win until the last second, and I don't put any of that negative in it. So I'm like, we got this. We could do this. We could do this. And then it all just started to happen in slow motion, not, getting the field goal. By the way, Jake Moody, what a game for him, because he made the first field goal, right? We always thought, okay, maybe he's going to miss that one. I thought he did fantastic, especially for a rookie being in there. But yeah, it was an out of body experience is the only way I can describe it.
One of John Breach's bowl predictions was that the longest field goal in Super Bowl history record would be broken.
And it was twice. Because it was first Moody.
Moody
and then
did
Bucker.
it. And then Bucker did it. So he got that one right too.
I mean, that's why this Pick Six 60s awards, you guys should give yourselves awards. Had 36,000 people.
I guess. I hate to bring it up, but and someone mentioned it. I think Breach mentioned it because Breach we call him passive aggressive Breach when he becomes a Bengals fan and wants everyone else to fail. Yeah. We have a undistinguished history of pick sixers going to their Super Bowl to see their teams and not faring well.
Well, he said that too, and I tried to negate it. I was like, but I'm only a part timer. I'm only on 2 days a week.
Which I thought was pretty funny. So we got to flip the script on that one.
We absolutely do, because I plan to go to more of these. One thing, looking at the Chiefs side of the ball, obviously we know Andy Reid will go down as one of the greatest coaches of all time. But when you look at Steve Spagnuolo, do you think he's worth doing another head coaching job? I mean, he put together a hell of a defense this year.
So I wonder if he just wants to do this, because sometimes when you've been around the block as a head coach and it hasn't worked out, and sometimes guys are better as coordinators than they are as head coaches. Dick LeBeau was the head coach for the Bengals for a while. That team did not do very well. He came back and became the Steelers defensive coordinator, and BMAC has story after story about how amazing he was at his job. And I wonder if Steve Spagnuolo is the same way. Steve Spagnuolo may go down as one of the best defensive coordinators, if not the best ever.
Yeah.
I've talked to people in the league that are like, this is one of the things that sort of changed the trajectory of the Chiefs. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes has a big part to do with that. But this is the first time the Chiefs offense hasn't been a juggernaut. And they've been able to rely on the defense to get them the ball back. The other thing that's sort of interesting is that when you're Steve Spagnuolo, you can blitz your brains out late in the game, which is exactly what he did against Brock Purdy, with the understanding that, you know what? Mm-hmm. Even if they score, guess who we have? Patrick Mahomes. Yep. So it's a double-edged sword in a good way for both the offense and the defense if you're Kansas City. I don't know if Spags wants to coach again. He very well may want to be a head coach, or he may love
just being a
situation where he has the head coach who's the best head coach ever, or second best head coach ever, one of the best head coaches ever, and one of the best quarterbacks ever, and you just coordinate up your guys. I know his players love him too, so there's a lot of reasons that Kansas City job is attractive with little of the pressure that comes with being a head coach.
Yeah. Stacking up rings on that side. You might as well just sit back and stack up rings.
Like, part of me wonders if Kyle Shanahan in his heart of hearts would want to be like, you know what? Can I just be a coordinator for the Chiefs or something? Like, a lower pressure job. I would imagine he's a type A guy and wants to win, but
Of course. But once you've lost 3 Super Bowls, you know what I mean? And two to the same team as the head coach, of course, anyone's like, why am I doing this to myself? I could just be a coordinator. But yes, I agree. He's not going to. And he said too, if I was going to lose with any group of guys, it's this group of guys. And it's not that they played a bad game, but there were certain mistakes that you just can't make. And I said this from the beginning. The 49ers had to play a perfect game to beat Patrick Mahomes, and they didn't. They were
close, though. That was the thing. Close. There were they didn't shoot themselves in the foot at any point. Patrick outlasted them.
Yeah. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words, Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the type of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. Looking at the futures, Super Bowl futures for next year.
Yeah, what's this about? I don't
understand. Why are the books still doubting the Chiefs here? Okay, if the last 2 years were supposed to be the years that the Chiefs weren't even going to make the Super Bowl, let alone win the Super Bowl, and they did. You got the Niners as the favorite is plus 550. Behind them, the Chiefs plus 650. Then the Ravens, Bills, Bengals, and Lions. What do you make of this?
I love that they asked Patrick about this on Monday. And he sort of laughed.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, I guess that's just a little extra motivation going into the offseason. I mean, what do we have to do is the sort of the takeaway there. I agree with you. It's I don't know. Maybe the thinking is that the AFC is better than the NFC. Maybe that's the thinking. And if that's the case, then there's an easier
it's
path.
harder for them to get there.
Yeah, maybe.
Path. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, because the Lions have gotten, pretty good. But yeah, I would say the NFC, it is an easier path for the 49ers to get there than
because there are 4 AFC teams on this list and then 2 NFC teams.
Right.
Bottom, so
that's got to be it. That makes sense. All right. You are the draft expert. You're going right from the Super Bowl, going to the combine,
going 2 weeks from now. I can't believe it.
Yeah, your turnaround is wild. Obviously, consensus here, Caleb Williams is the number 1 overall, but do you think there's going to be any big trades, any surprises?
Yes, there's going to be a ton of trades, in part because this quarterback class is pretty deep, in part because there are a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. I keep doing the count. So 18 teams, the top 18 teams, those are the teams that didn't make the playoffs. I think I counted 12 or 13 teams that need quarterbacks to some degree. So there are a ton of teams that need quarterbacks, and you could even count teams like the Steelers. The Dolphins have been sort of mentioned as a team that maybe they go after Kirk Cousins and trade Tua or something crazy like that. So, yes, there are going to be a ton of trades, and it's going to be incredibly interesting. The question becomes with Caleb, who I think is the best player in this draft, is his dad's going to be sort of a pain. And I've talked to dad. So his dad, I've had a scout say he is LaMelo Ball in terms of being right. So he's meddling.
Yikes.
There have been some sort of gurglings of that over the fall. I've had other teams say, yeah, you can manage it. And it's about what you're willing to put up with when you're talking about a star player. But I give Caleb credit. He didn't have to play this season. His team were getting their brains beat out regularly down the stretch. He kept showing up and he kept balling out. And I think he's, as a football player, he's awesome. So then the question becomes, does Washington at number 2 or the Patriots at number 3 think enough of him to trade up? Do the Falcons at number 8 think enough of him to trade up? And then there's Drake May. And then there's Jaden Daniels. And then there's J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr., all guys that have a chance to be drafted in the first round. So I think unlike the last few years, we're going to see some moving and shaking at the top, which makes it even more interesting and more volatile. And the thing about the draft, and I mean, you know this, Katie, but unlike betting week to week, there's no reason for teams to release information. Right. So no one knows anything.
I was surprised by a lot of things in this last draft.
It is so hard to get information because there's no benefit for a team to tell you what they're going to do. Sometimes I'll talk to agents that have an idea of what's happening closer to the end of the process. And that's because they have clients who are teams are interested in. But in general, if someone says something 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out, they probably don't know what they're talking about.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was surprised by a lot of things. Who do you think could be for instance, the 49ers took a kicker in the 3rd round, which was surprising to me. Yeah. The Texans made a lot of moves there at the last second in the 1st round. What's a surprise that you could predict happening this year?
Ooh, so let's see here. So I want to see what happens with Washington and New England at 2 and 3, whether they want to trade up. Whether they love one quarterback more than the next, because that's going to be interesting there.
Don't the Bears have the number 1 overall?
The Bears have the number 1 overall pick because that's the one that the Panthers traded.
Do you think that they're still keeping Justin Fields, or are they in the mix for Caleb?
I think they're moving on from Justin Fields. I think it's one of those things, and our buddy Joe Musso and I were talking about this as well. He's a Bears fan, but he says every morning he wakes up with a different thought about what's going to happen.
Right.
But I think, as we sort of read the tea leaves, we'll know more in a few weeks when we get to the combine. But I feel like new office coordinator.
There should be a new coach, though. I was shocked that they're keeping Eberflus.
Eberflus is staying. Players like him, but I mean, if you're not winning, you're not winning. But they did get a new offensive coordinator, which I think is important. And if that's the case, you feel like they're going to go away from Justin. Also, the fun thing about Washington is they hired Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah,
he coached Caleb last year at USC.
Yep.
The best comp for Caleb is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
He coached Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. So there's that fun little angle there.
Okay.
Whether they trade up. What's that?
I want him to go to Washington now.
I think that is best case scenario for everyone involved because he knows Cliff. They have a ton of cap space. It's a great market. The weather's not terrible like Chicago might be or New England. And he would be an immediate sensation. He's a DC guy.
Yeah. Who did they hire as the head coach? I can't remember, but I was surprised by it.
Washington.
Quinn. Yes, Dan Quinn.
Dan Quinn. I told everybody Rick Spielman he had one job, get Ben Johnson. He ended up what's going on.
And the fact that, why does Belichick still not have a job?
Yeah. And apparently he didn't want all that power. We'll see. What happens is the agents start pushing out the stories. I don't think Belichick has an agent, but they start pushing out the stories about the counter factuals after the first wave of stories about them being difficult or pains or whatever. So that's a whole other layer to media and
yeah.
It's weird. But in terms of things that I definitely know, I don't know. Like I really don't know.
What do you think? What's your hunch?
All right, so let's do it. I'm going to say 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. So Caleb.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. Caleb, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix Jr. Some teams don't like Michael Penix Jr. They have him as a 3rd rounder. Some has him as a 1st rounder.
Well, that was like CJ Stroud this last year, and look how well he did.
And that's the other thing. Or Brock Purdy. We don't know.
Yep.
And that's what I keep coming back to. No one knows. The other wild card is J.J. McCarthy. Like, J.J. McCarthy wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan. I don't know if he's a great player or not. He's a good player. He's a great athlete, has a good arm. My buddy Rick Spielman loves him. I was like, I just don't know. I haven't seen enough.
Yeah.
And sort of like Will Levis, you can squint and see it, but you don't see it like you see with Caleb Williams or with CJ Stroud now. It's hard. But I think 5 have a chance to go, in part because they're intriguing, but also because next year's quarterback class might be kind of stinky. And if you want to get ahead of that.
Right.
So these are all the things you have to think about.
Well, when there was a stinky quarterback class, that's when the Steelers picked up you-know-who.
Man, I'm at the point now, Katie, where I think Adam Schefter reported that maybe Justin Fields will be in. I was like, go get him. Don't care. Just let's see what happens.
Justin Fields would be great.
And Arthur Smith. Like, Arthur Smith caught a lot of flack. I was talking to folks in the league about this at the Senior Bowl. Like, this is a great hire for the Steelers. Okay, I'm in. Just give me a quarterback, and then we can go from there. So I
agree.
That's an example where you don't need to be a coach. You need to be a coordinator. And Arthur Smith, I think, understands that.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you 100%. All right. I know you got to get out of here. You're hopping on HQ pretty soon. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want more draft information, Ryan Wilson is the guy. The With the First Pick podcast airs what days and what times?
Tuesdays and Thursdays for now at 11 a.m. And then after the combine, Katie, they're going to make us go 3 times a week. So it'll be probably Monday, Wednesday, Friday up until the draft, which, as I look at my little board over here, is 72 days from now.
Wow. You catch us on the NFL on CBS YouTube channel. It's also going to be on CBS Sports Network at some point in the next few months. So make sure that you follow Ryan at Ryan Wilson not on CBS, just at Ryan Wilson CBS. Kind of a little play on word there, which I like. Wilson, again, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been Moxie Bets presented by Caesars Sportsbook. Make sure you subscribe on all of our social channels. We'll be back on Thursday talking NBA. We're flipping the script here. We're getting ourselves into the NBA. It was a great football season. Thanks for hanging with us. We'll see you soon.